I think some of that comes through gratitude. I mean, definitely, again, during the past year when I kept thinking about all the things that I don't have and don't get to do or doing without, tried to return to kind of this just really recognizing God's grace and the simple pleasures, eating a great fish taco, playing games with my kids, hearing them laugh, walking the dog and just seeing flowers, feeling the warm San Diego sun, and just tried to see that stuff as this is God's grace.
Hey there, and welcome to the Midweek Moment, where we talk about questions about life and faith and how they both come together. So today we have Pastor Carter Moss on the show, and we just kicked off a brand new conversation series on grace. You want to check out Pastor Carter's message from this past weekend. The link is going to be in the description down below. Grace, man, it is such a word that we use a lot in church, outside of church. Talk to us about grace. What is grace?
Nice, easy question, right?
Yeah.
Volumes have been written on it.
There you go.
Yeah. No, I love talking about grace. I mean, it's obviously super foundational to our faith. Kind of that, it's this interesting word and idea that it's so simple. Like you can just get it. But it's also so deep that, we could spend hours and the rest of our lives figuring it out. So, plus a word that just gets used a lot, right? Like, someone moves with grace or act with grace or this kind of thing. But yeah, really the simplest definition, and honestly, someone shared it with me back in college when the first time grace really clicked for me, was they just said, think of it as it's an undeserved gift. And yeah, just think about that. I mean, I do love getting gifts, and it's nice when someone thinks about it for your birthday and for Christmas and these different things. But if you ever get one just out of the blue, or we had someone during COVID, it was a couple from our life group, just like a couple hours before dinner time on a Friday said, hey, what's your address? I'm coming by. We baked some food and we just want to drop off dinner for you, just out of the blue, no reason. And I love that idea because you almost don't know what to do with it, right? And like my first thought is, I need to pay them back. What am I going to buy them? What am I going to cook for them? And so to me, that helps me understand grace. It's that idea of, I didn't earn it, I didn't ask for it, but someone went first. God went first with it, and he offers it. And, so much more than grace means like, God loves you, he's nice to you. It's like, no, it's this depth of like, I'll forgive everything you've ever done and will ever do. And I can't wait to spend eternity with you, even in all your failures and mistakes and messiness, like just that idea. So kind of mind-blowing when you get into it.
Yeah. I love that even in, even in your mess, even in your successes, grace happens, and it has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
That's the thing about grace. People sometimes misunderstand, and they think like, hey, grace is about us, or somehow I had a hand in grace. But grace has nothing to do with us. It has everything to do with the lover, and the lover is God, right? We are the beloved, so I love that. Funny, I heard Bono, of all people, I think you would appreciate this, from the band U2. He talked about grace, and the way he described it was, in an interview, he said, it defies logic, it defies reason, it's a love that interrupts all the karma stuff. Like you reap what you sow, right, is kind of the way of the world. And he says, but grace interrupts that. And it it just happens. So I thought that was a really cool definition of grace.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know about you, but I had to wrestle with it, even as a concept I've studied a lot of my life and even gotten to teach and preach on. But once COVID hit and I'm at home, sort of doing less for God, I mean, still figuring out how do I pastor now, but it felt like I'm doing less for God. And I had to come to this realization of, he doesn't love me any less. He's not up there going on page like, hey, when are you going to get back to kind of doing all this stuff for me? And so it doesn't lessen our calling. It just always reminds me, like, don't let my identity become like just what I do. Let my identity be grace. He loves you. Like we say, he loves you just as you are, not as you should be, that kind of thing. So I have to keep coming back to grace.
That's really good. That's really good. I love this definition. I wrote it down. Grace is love that seeks you out when you have nothing to give in return. And grace is being loved when you're unlovable. And so I think you captured a lot of that in just your definition and helping us understand in everyday terms what grace is, not some fancy acronym that, we really can't apply to our daily lives. So that's really good. There's this great verse, and this is what this series really is all about. It's helping us experience grace, but to grow in grace. Peter talks about it in his letter, Second Peter. He says, grow in the grace and in the knowledge of Jesus. So there's an aspect of grace where we have to grow in. It's not a
Yeah.
one and done,
Yeah.
I got the grace sort of a
Yeah.
thing. So on a practical level, how do we grow in experiencing grace every day?
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, it's tough, right? I think to get practical with grace, we'll definitely do our best in this series. And I think God has led us to a lot of great ideas. But yeah, I think part of grace is it's really about the awareness of it daily. And so, I think some of that comes through gratitude. I mean, definitely, again, during the past year when I kept thinking about all the things that I don't have and don't get to do or doing without, tried to return to kind of this just really recognizing God's grace and the simple pleasures, eating a great fish taco, playing games with my kids, hearing them laugh, walking the dog and just seeing flowers, feeling the warm San Diego sun, and just tried to see that stuff as this is God's grace. He still showers it down on me and still wants me to experience it and enjoy it. So I think gratitude's been a big piece of it for me. And probably confession is another one. I know growing up, confession was like a sacrament. You do it in this room with this person and that kind of thing. But just learning, and that's okay, but learning to make confession like a regular part of prayer. So my prayers aren't just asking God for things, but also a chance to just own up stuff I've done, come clean to God. Because every time we do, it's another chance to get to experience grace and remember it, and receive it again. So.
Yeah. I like the idea of surrendering to,
Yeah.
because surrendering keeps us from striving.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And grace and striving, I mean, they don't go together.
Yeah.
They're like oil and water. And
Yeah.
so, whenever I'm in a posture of surrender, I know that grace is flowing through my life. So I think it's just a powerful, even prayer to begin with. God,
Yeah.
I have so much on my plate, and here's my calendar, and here's my to-do list. And I just help me surrender and
Yeah.
be in that posture of surrender today,
Yeah.
so that I'm leaning on your grace and not my own strength. So
Yeah.
that was really helpful. I think that's so important for especially our viewers watching and listening, is because not experiencing and growing in grace makes us become probably some of the most ungracious. I don't even know if that's a word, but we can
Yeah.
become really ungracious people, where we know about grace, but we don't show it in our lives. And
Yeah.
you've met that person. We've met that
Yeah.
person. They're like so judgy and like,
Yeah.
slow to forgive, and you name it, right? But yet they say they're followers of Christ, and yet we don't see grace in their lives. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. If we're not careful, then grace, we start to believe over time, like especially the longer you're a Christ follower, that like, I think I have earned this grace a little bit. I think I do kind of deserve it. And then it's dangerous because then we start to decide, we become the grace police. Mm-hmm. Who do we think deserves grace and who doesn't? Which there is, deserve grace is an oxymoron, I guess. So, right. Yeah. So you're right. I mean, we totally lose sight of it when we kind of drift away from just understanding our need. I think that's why, I know sometimes people think churches, they're always beating you up, talk about sin, your brokenness and shame. And it's true. It can be done in a way that's always making you feel bad. And just, I'm supposed to have terrible self-esteem, when actually the point of talking about my own brokenness and sin is, no, just so I always remember my need for grace. As soon as we lose touch with that, pride comes in. We kind of become like Pharisees. I mean, that's really what happened. Those guys had huge hearts for God. They just lost sight of grace. And then it all became about pride and about, kind of legalism. So
It's true.
Yeah.
Is there a story of grace that helped you in your journey to understand grace more fully, or even just catch a little bit of God's heart when it comes to grace?
I'd say in terms of a story and even a Bible story. I mean, I think it's the greatest story Jesus ever told is the story of the prodigal son, because I'm a dad and got a couple of boys and just that idea that we're all God's kids and, we want to run away and rebel. And then when we hit rock bottom, we kind of crawl back to him in shame and embarrassed. I picture the prodigal son like rehearsing his speech. I don't know, maybe dad will at least let me sleep in the doghouse or something. And then to come home to a party. like surprise party. Dads can't wait to hug him and throw the nicest robe on him, welcome him back. I'm like, that's the heart of God. That's the heart of grace, is I want to welcome you home to a big old party no matter what you've done. And it's part of Jesus' little trilogy there: lost sheep, lost coin, lost son, that God will do anything to find those. So yeah, that kind of grace. And then I love seeing it play out, like our actual lives. We both, thankfully in our job, we get to meet people. I love watching someone who thought their life was over. Maybe they did some time, served time in prison or whatever, and they get out and just have this incredible beauty in their life and new purpose, and God's working through them. And if you didn't know them before and didn't know their past, you'd have no idea. And I just see, because it feels like God doing the Apostle Paul story over and over again. And for sure, then in my own life, I think about times, definitely mistakes I made, failures I had in sort of my software jobs, but God still let me keep jobs doing some of that. I think in ministry, definitely some leadership failures, stuff. Times I just wish I would have led my team better, invested in people better. I missed opportunities. I let fear kind of drive sometimes. But then I look, and God's still changing lives and letting people get baptized and find Jesus. And that always reminds me, okay, God, it really is your grace, even when I mess it up. So
that's good. I love the phrase. I think someone coined it, and I've just adopted it. Grace fills in the gaps.
Yeah.
Right. And I just
good,
hear that because, even on our best days, there's so many gaps.
Yeah.
And what we can do, what we hope to do, and what needs to happen. I just love how God's grace just fills in those gaps.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about growing in our understanding, deepening our understanding of grace. So I know there's some helpful resources out there, maybe that our viewers can pick up and just begin their journey of growing in grace. Could you just throw out a few that personally have helped you that they can pick up?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. If you're one of those people that isn't sure where to start reading in the Bible, definitely, any of Paul's letters, but especially 2 Timothy has great stuff on grace, for sure. Romans and Ephesians, really good, and Galatians, really. So, outside of that, really any book by Brennan Manning. I ended up reading 4 or 5 of his books during quarantine time because I just wanted to dive into grace. A couple of great books by Philip Yancey are really good. We did a book together as kind of a sermon team to prep for this called Surrender to Love. That's
like
a
David
great one.
Benner.
David Benner. So that's a great one. There's some great on the Bible reading app, YouVersion, some great kind of studies about grace on there as well, kind of daily devotional kind of ones. So all those are super helpful. I'm a huge fan of, because I want to keep growing in my knowledge of grace. Even as someone who's given a lot of sermons on it, I feel like I'm still in like first or second grade on understanding it. Like I just want to keep learning. I don't feel like I've got this mastered now. Like I just want to find more metaphors, more analogies, more verses, more truths that just help it sink in deeper to me and make sense. So
that's so great. And then you brought up the prodigal son story.
Yeah.
There's a great book by Tim Keller,
right.
Prodigal God,
Yep.
too.
That's
That's
a great
definitely
one,
worth a pickup. So between those, 4, 5, 6 resources, I think there's
Yeah.
plenty to get us going. But I'm so stoked because like you said, just the more we read about grace, it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much depth and infiniteness to our understanding of grace. So I'm excited. So we encourage you to journey with us in our series for the next 3 weeks. The series is called Undone, and it's all about grace and experiencing grace. So we encourage you to join us online or in person. And if you found this content to be helpful, always hit that like button, subscribe, share this with somebody so that they can experience God's grace in their life too. But thank you for joining us today. Until next week's episode, have a great day and God bless you.